Pergola. So back in May, my wife told me that for her birthday, she wanted a pergola. And we went through a bunch of pictures on the internet, and she found some pictures of pergolas that had curved beams, and those really sort of worked out for her. That's what she wanted, so I proceeded to start making curved beams. What you're seeing here is me basically mocking up a little temporary table to build the beams on. I needed something that was going to be long enough to build a beam that was eventually going to be about 16 feet long and flat. So I took some of my 2x material that I was going to use for the pergola, screwed it together, clamped them to some sawhorses, and used that for my temporary table. Now, to make the curved beams, I had to cut some clamping blocks so I could bend the individual strips of lumber and have a place to clamp them. So that's what you can see I'm doing here. Okay, so once I got the table clamped up, I found the middle of it, and I put one of my clamping blocks at the top of the table. And so once I got my clamping block screwed on, I went ahead and ripped down my 2x material. And I think I started out with 2x12s here. And I just ripped them into 1-inch strips. And I kept all my strips in order, so as I ripped down a board, I would set the strip aside, and I kept them in order so I could put them back together in the same order they came off of the 2x material. And that would make the fact that the 2x had been cut down into strips a little less obvious when it was glued back together. What I did was I found the center of my 2x material, the strips that I cut, lined it up with the center line on my table, and clamped my 2x material to the, or my 2x strip to the clamping block here in the center of the table. And this first strip required a little special handling to be sure it was attached and properly secured to the table. So once I had it clamped in the middle, I could establish the bend on one side and screw on the clamping block down at the end, at the 7 foot away mark. So now I've got this block down on the end. What I can do is create my bend, run me a screw into that 1-inch strip from the outside of that clamping block. And then that way, when I'm finished with the beam, I can unscrew the beams on the block. So now I've secured my first strip on one side. I'm going to turn it around and do the same on the other side. And I'm unclamping from that middle clamping block there just to make the curve a little bit smoother. And by securing this first strip to those outer blocks, then that basically establishes the curve that I'm going for on this beam. So now that I've established my curve, I'm going to come in here and put a couple of extra clamping blocks. That way I can distribute some clamps a little more evenly along the curve as I do the glue up. And the positioning of these blocks is totally dependent on that initial curving of that first strip. And you can see there that I have also wrapped my table in saran wrap. I certainly didn't want to glue my beam to my table. So what you're seeing me do here is calculate where the cross members are going to intersect with the curved beam here. And I'm going to glue this lamination together with Gorilla Glue. It's a urethane glue, and it's a glue that's activated by moisture, which is perfect for pressure treated lumber because it's extremely moist material. So the moisture in the lumber will actually activate the urethane glue for the lamination. So we're going to spread it out with a putty knife, line up the center lines, clamp it in the center, and then bend it around each side, clamp it, and then run down the whole length with decking screws, 1¼ inch deck screws. So each one of the lamination pieces is screwed to the last one with 1¼ inch deck screws, and it's also secured with the urethane Gorilla Glue. All right, so there's a beam, the first one, all glued up, all screwed up. Just gotta let the glue dry. See, it's got a nice curve in it. I had several of the pieces break as I was bending them because of knots, and in that case you just have to put the pieces together, clamp it on each side of the break, clamp it on each side, put a screw in it, and go on about your business. So here's something else I didn't know. Gorilla Glue will stick to saran wrap. Hey, but at least it didn't stick to my form. I'm using this guy as one of the cross members in the pergola, but right now it's serving double duty as a jig because I needed something 16 feet long and relatively flat. But there you go, beam 1. Now I just got to do beam 2. Oh, one other thing. As I was starting with this, I went ahead and marked out my center line. This is the center of the beam, and I made a mark on my jig, 3 inches, 4 inches, something, just some random distance to each side of that center line, because I know
I'm going to be notching this beam for the cross members. So I'm going to have one here in the center. I'm going to have one here on the end. The edge of this block is right at 14 feet. This is the outside edge of the post. So I made a mark about 8 inches to the inside and didn't put any screws in this area. There's going to be a notch in right here. So there's like a screw here all across and one on the very end just to hold the ends together. The ends are getting cut off as well, but I know that there's screws here. I don't really know where the screws are, all out in here. Also made a mark right here because this is where the beams to either side of the center beam are going to be. So no screws in that area. But yeah, one curved beam. Looks like it's going to rain. So I guess we're going to have to wait till some other day on the second curved beam. Also got to get 60 grit belt for the belt sander because I got to smooth the sucker out. It's a little rough, but I knew it would be.
So after the glue dries, I'm going to come in here with a paint scraper, scrape off all the squeeze out. One of the properties of that urethane glue, that Gorilla Glue, is that it foams up, and it's pretty good at filling cracks, but it does foam up and squeeze out, and so we're scraping that off. I don't want to load up my sanding belts with glue, so we're going to scrape off all the glue first, and then we're going to basically sand this entire beam flat. So I started sanding the beams with a 36 grit, and I was sanding across the grain, and that really quickly leveled out the surface of the beam, and took out the high spots, took out the low spots. Followed up the 36 grit with a 60 grit belt at a 45-degree angle just to make sure I took out all the 36 grit scratches. Finished it up with 120 grit, I think, and went with the grain on that one, and got the surfaces of the beams really, really smooth.
All right, so started with 36 grit, went to 60, finished up 120, so I got this side smooth. Now what I'm going to do before I turn it over, I know this is the center of the beam here, so I need to make some marks for the center. I need to make some marks out at the end and in between where each of the cross members are going to go, because I'm going to have to cut half laps for those cross members to go in. So while I've got it sitting here and I've got a way to know where the center is and know where my 14-foot ends are, I need to go ahead and make those marks.